There's a okay, so and another inferior philosophy that Selassie said we have to destroy. Um, it comes in the picture very early in the history of Western discourse. You know, okay, so people like Homer, like
1212 Radio Culture. Good afternoon, people. Thank you for joining us today for today's broadcast. We are live on the bi weekly lecture from the Rastafari Council of Ghana. Today's speaker is Ras Kwesi Anoche, aka Seven Fireside, and he's speaking on the topic Africans were the first abolitionists. We are happy to join. We are happy to have you on the show, and we do apologize for the late start of the show. Let's go straight to join the lecture. Thank you.
slaves, right? And that's how the world is structured for the most part now. All right. And then you have someone like Pliny the Elder, you know, very thoughtful person doing all of that. And he starts around the first century, you know, he started writing things like, in the heart of Black Africa, we did it as monsters. We would be monsters where we did it. This was stuff where he would be a knowledgeable person way to tell the world, right? So we did it with monsters. We don't get nose, we don't get mouth, we don't get voices. Yeah, so these are the ideas that people are projecting to sort of like make themselves feel good about who they are as white people. Benjamin Isaac, I think he's a Jewish writer, a researcher. He makes a very brilliant point about how this idea of racism, he calls it proto-racism, started out of Greece, where they were trying to make themselves the center of everything, right? You don't know what's going on over there, but you tell yourself, say, hey, you're the best. And that's where these ideas were coming from. These guys were actually writing. And so when you write, you have an advantage of pushing your idea over other people who are not actually writing. By the 15th century, these ideas are developed so strong that Europe is actually busy self-defining itself to the world. Now, let's remember that this is the discovery age, right? They started traveling around the world. They start to, do the imperialism, take over lands and all that. They're busy doing PR, to, project themselves as legit, right? A lot of things are working for them, though, because just around 1440, the printing press is invented, right? So they have this printing revolution, and now they're putting the ideas out there. This is what the world is, right? We all grew up hearing this, it is written thing, right? Somebody will come up with something, talk about something in the Bible, it is written, or even the law, it is written. And most people will not even stop to question it, but yeah, so they were printing stuff around that time, and just around that time, 1941, two Portuguese explorers returned to Portugal from Africa, West Africa, with 12 Africans from Mauritania, black people like us from Mauritania. We present them to Henry the Navigator, it was a thing in the news. Everybody would hear about it, like say, this is what we do, right? Just remember that Aristotle them have set some thoughts going on. It's developed of this. This is already like 15th century, so this is a while now. At least 1,000 years have gone by, right? These ideas keep growing, right? And so now, 1455, the papal bull is put out. The Pope puts out an order that Christians have the right to go and enslave anybody who's not a Christian and seize their property or possessions or, whatever we want to call them, which includes your land, right? So we feel free to Africa. Once we're not Christians, they have a right to seize our land. This is the Pope talking about this sitting somewhere in Europe, right? You don't know where to go on, and just same year, the first Bible is printed. So it's giving them some authority, right? Like, yeah, it is written. The Pope say, God say, stop putting things in God's mouth, And this whole concept of the curse of Ham, right? Black people are cursed, right? Noah and his sons thing played up seriously in this Christian and Muslim circles, right? Now, we're talking about all of this. We're going to talk about how the Christian and the Muslims were really integral to this problem. Like they was pushing this thing. Matter of fact, we see the Muslims started before them. But I have to also say that Muslims were resisting it, were fighting against slavery on the African continent as well. Some were involved, some were fighting. And those are the ones we're interested in, the resistance. Okay. So Let's remember that slavery was the norm back then. Once you had a state, right, there was going to be some warfare, even sometimes to create a state. Right? It was seldom that you have a state where you don't deal with warfare. You're going to have to deal with money, right? The idea of money, whatever form it took. Just because you have a state, you have to have all these things in place, right? And there was slavery attached to it, right? Major issue, but it was a reality. Now we can talk about what kind of slavery and all that in a second. We'll do that. Let's remember that more than 1 million Europeans at one point in time were enslaved by North African, they call them pirates, right? But slavery was a thing in the world. Anyone could be enslaved, Asians, so we just but there were some checks in there as time went by, like you can't do this to a slave, It was a certain kind of internal logic to it, right? But when it came to black people, based on this discourse that was coming out of Europe, and matter of fact, some areas of thought in the Muslim world, or let's call it Arabia, there were no checks on who we be. I mean, how they would deal with us when it came to slavery, because Africa is that land, right? Now, this is not to say these people didn't know the history. They knew the history. They knew about the greatness of Africa. Anyone who studied the documents knew, right? They actually taught it to them, the greatness of Africa. But they're developing this discourse on the side to prove that they're somebody. And now they start to write and push these other ideas. There's a lot of research that's been done to talk about these contradictions, where they know that the things they're saying about Africa is not true, but they're writing these things to make themselves feel like they're somebody. They're developing their identity in sort of like in contrast to Africa. So they have to lie and come up with all this stuff. Okay, so there's an interesting scene where, in fact, we attempted a lot of times to talk about, we hear a lot of people talk about, racial slavery, and what's the problem I'm thinking about this question, right? People talk about how, we can separate chattel slavery from kinship slavery. In Africa, for the most part, it could be like kinship slavery, like you don't abuse someone who you call a slave. Brother Rasman was talking there about, names like Don't Call and all that, right? It wasn't like the way when they put a name on you in the West, it didn't mean, okay? But for instance, there's a man called J. Valentine in 1864. He said they were journeying up the river Niger. That's how they call it, right? And he encountered people who were enslaved and their masters working together on the farm. And he noticed that the enslaved person was not forced to work. He just decided not to work. And he tried to find out what was going on. They say, the master and the slave they can share the same clothes even, there's nothing like they eat the same food, Matter of fact, the slave's life is sort of a little more convenient in terms of he had more freedom to do all sorts of things, and the master had to take care of them. So there's another logic. This is what they call kinship. They become like family, right? We know about people in Africa, I don't want to mention names, who come from this. They captured to a war or something. They started out as a captive, as a slave, and they become a king or a chief, as they'll say, right? So there's a different kind of logic. So sometimes some people think that, okay, if this white people are buying slaves, okay, yeah, they're going to treat them with some dignity. Nope. When it came to Africa, outside of Africans out of Africa, there were no checks on how we were supposed to be treated. Some people have argued that it was better in the East than in the West, but that's another conversation to have. I'm just coming from the position of slavery, right? Selassie abolished slavery. Selassie was concerned about slavery. There was no room for justifying any aspect of it. So that's why I stand and I approach this question. There's no better slavery. Let's remember that the transatlantic slave took off. When it took off, there were already 3 other slaveries, or black slaveries, so slave trades, as they call it. We know the trade is about kidnapping and robbery and, thieving. right? And lies. So they use this trade word, but we know that that was just a dot of the whole thing. Much of it was just snatching people and taking people, right? Okay, and this is what our people were resisting, the slavery that was happening, So we have four different slave trades going on at the same time, right? Around by the 7th century in the Indian Ocean, Africans would be taken from East Africa to the Middle East and Asia. Maybe some of us have heard of the Zanj Rebellion, right? Around the 9th century. This is, they call it a slave rebellion, black rebellion, right? Blacks have been brought there as slaves, a lot of us. And how long did this thing take? 14 years of fighting. This is a major thing. Think about it. You wake up every day for 14 years, and the slaves in your land are fighting militarily. They killed tens of thousands of people, right? It's a serious thing. Some of us can tap into it. Maybe maybe one of us will come up with a presentation on that topic. So it's an interesting pocket of knowledge that speaks to our situation, where we're going with this discussion. The only thing on our minds when captivity became a thing was to rebel, destroy this. If we're going to say it was an unconscious level, the idea was to end this whole thing, like Selassie said, totally destroy this idea. Okay. So at the same time, quick one, even before we go on to the other ones, we just have to bear in mind that they were taking people from East Africa to India, and they were shipping some of them to the New World, just around the time the transatlantic slave was happening. You get a picture. We're used to people being taken, stories people being taken from West Africa straight. But the movements to the east were so strong that the British people who were controlling the turf over there in the India area would ship some of our people, the Africans from East Africa, to the New World as well. Okay, so we have to remember that it was the Red Sea trade as well, where people from Ethiopia, the Horn of Africa area, and other East African countries were shipped over to the Mediterranean for slavery. And then we're going to have to talk about the trans-Saharan trade too, where they were selling and buying Africans. So people from Arab lands would bring people, places like, and Salaga were had markets where people would, at the north of the Sahara, and come bring people here. Maybe along the way they'd be capturing people, whatever, and come bring our people there and come sell. And then the Europeans would go there and buy our people and bring them over. Of course, there were all sorts of forces. It wasn't just them and the Europeans. There were people in between who were also trying to sell and make a living off of that. Now we'll talk about the economics of that time too, right? But first, let's just think quickly about what is the will of the people while all this is going on. When we're talking about people buying and selling Africans, but what is the will of the African people, right? And a good illustration we could work with at this point is, just think of this: you're living in your town and you see slave drivers, right, moving people through your town, right? They've tied us, a whole lot of us have tied us, and we're marching and we're going. I don't know where you see, Asafo people, warriors, can just jump up and attack the scuffle and free them. When you see pictures of them carrying guns and all that, basically, back to the thing we started with, the picture we started with, right? They're defending the trade, what you're doing, right? Because people attack the couples to just free people. Now, just remember that. Just if I say you're walking all the way from Salaga, or maybe you reach somewhere like Techiman, right? The people in Techiman don't know these captives. They're not from their town, right? But they will attack the couple and free because they understood that this is something that's happening to us. So we're seeing a binding factor. People started talking about things that would divide us. Oh, yeah, no, not true. These patterns were real all over the continent wherever there was slavery. People were just saying, this is a question. Racial slavery is a question that affects us as a people, as Black people. It affected all of us, So that's the will of the people we're seeing right there. Just imagine your town where you're inside, they will come burn it to the ground. Everybody has to run, right? Seriously, we all know about Gambia, right? Benin, Dahomey, they have the houses on stilts in the water. I'm sure we all see them. images of them at least. Abeokuta was another place where people were running away. The housing hospitals were basically trying to get away to a place where the enslavers wouldn't get them. Which makes nonsense of the idea that, oh yeah, some people were sent someplace and those are the ones who were taken to captivity. Anyone could be taken, and people were resisting. Escaping is resisting. They're saying no to that institution called slavery. So Abeokuta, Nigeria, is another place that moved up on the rocks because it thought it was a better position to see the enslavers coming, where they go for attack them, where they go for escape. And then we know about Cape Verde. The Cape Verde Islands basically was founded on that premise. Like, okay, we're getting out of this place, we'll be here, and it'll be harder for them to come for us, right? So these are all moves that people are making with the idea of how do we end this nonsense around us. Okay, so back to the language. When they say trade, we know it's about kidnapping, raiding, stealing, right? In a world where now it has become like you're going to enslave or be enslaved, a lot of things have been destabilized. Now, remember we started talking about how the Arabs started coming around the 7th century AD, and now we're talking about the Portuguese or Europeans start coming around the 1500s. It's quite a long time, right? Night and day, week after week, month after month, year after month, year, decades, things that happen centuries, right? So this is becoming the way the world is to most of us, right? So in the process, what comes with this kind of slavery when you're kidnapping and all and stealing and all that? Corruption is a thing, right? And some researchers have said the corruption we see in Africa today, and of course in Europe and America. So anytime we talk about corruption in Africa, let's talk about corruption in Europe and America too. Because you can't mess with us and think you're messed up. That's why you're messing with us. Their politics is also corrupt. The economics is corrupt. But we'll focus on that. When we have to. So they destabilized the politics of Africa, of course, right? They destabilized the justice system. Some people did all sorts of things just to get an upper hand because of slavery. They could make up stuff. They destroy the social system. People some places we call our hometown today, we're not our hometowns. But people were escaping from places and showed up somewhere and said, well, maybe this would be the best place to be. So that people moved to. Some people kept moving because of the slavery thing. I'm giving examples of Gambia and Abeokuta and Cape Verde, but there were other sorts of configurations that came up just because we had to get away from enslavers. So the economics of it became a thing where it was like, this is a very interesting dynamic. Either you want to live in peace and poverty, or you want to prosper, and that means you have to engage in warfare and you have to engage in slavery. And this is a very tricky one to talk about, not to legitimize it, but this was the reality for us. To look at the nations that prospered, they were the ones that engaged in that. And those who were like, we want a peace of mind and all that, because the global market was not built around that, around slavery, right? African flesh, backed with gold. Sometimes they're not even backed with gold. Matter of fact, if you look at your language, you start realizing that, when they talk about guineas, they're talking about Africans, right? They used to call them currency guineas at one point in Europe, right? Or when even in banking, they talk about, I'm in the black, when your money looks good in bank, right? In the bank, in the red when I'm broke, right? Black was the currency, African bodies was the currency, like the money, and now they've created all this, instability. They're saying, hey, you need guns for security. You do need guns for security because you're being attacked. If you don't attack, you're being attacked. Because it's a crazy thing that's happening on the continent. People are resisting, and people are doing all these things too. So people are buying the guns, and the only way you're going to buy these guns is you're demanding, African flesh, right? Haile Selassie would tell us one thing. It describes it as it was like a ransom that we had to pay, right? The bodies that we're taking was like a ransom that we had to pay for this larger project of taking over Africa. They destabilize Africa, and they're trying to take the continent. At that point, maybe it was not formalized, but that was the idea. This is a place where they actually had ideas like Africa was a no man's land. Just like how today they talk about Mars and the moon, right? Once they go into a place of like, I don't see anything here, or I don't see anything that looks like me, so this is a no man's land. So they were trying to take Africa, and Selassie said what? It took bloody violence, right? That was the language being spoken. Overwhelming violence that some of us succumbed to, and some of us survived, fighting back, So Slussy's not talking about some peaceful, some easy to arrangement where some people were just, it affected all of us, and we're going to get into some situations. But quickly, we'll start from Ghana, present-day Ghana, like then the white people call it Gold Coast. We didn't call it that. Most of us have heard about Kwame Nkrumah in 1482. He meets this man, Don Diego Azambu, just shows up at what they call Elmina today. He already has prefabricated parts of the Elmina Castle waiting on the water. He's already decided that's what he's about to come do, right? This is the first prefabricated building. Some people say on the African continent. It was a new concept. Go build something, you bring all the parts and everything already figured out, waiting on the water. And he comes to talk to King Kwame Nkrumah and say, hey, can you please give us some land, whatever? And Kwame Nkrumah said, no, man, you can come and do a trade and leave because of the sea problems coming up, And these guys had brought their stuff already, so they went ahead and started building, And there were conflicts. While they were building, they started to even destroy some things, destroy homes and all that. So people rose up and, attacked them, give them a rough time. And they came to see the king again, and we're trying to come to some terms. And the king said, okay, look, man, you guys, if you say peace, you will really be true about the peace, Otherwise, you're the ones that are going to lose out. They came in for the gold, but they never got to know where the gold was coming from because the people around the place were trying to block them up from where they were getting it, But long story short, we hear stories about Kwame Nkrumah met them and sold out and gave them a chance to do whatever they wanted to do. Or some people have stories about how when he met him first, he said no, and the son he agreed. Something happened between the two moments where there was combat, there was hostilities, they fought, and white people were the ones that were losing out. They knew they couldn't hang around this place where, people were always up against them. So they tried to negotiate, and they went ahead and built the thing. But they were trying to now abide by the rules of the people wanted in that place. Problematic though, so the resistance and stuff. What did Kwame Nkrumah do? He would send ships to harass the European ships, European vessels on the water. Did he just harass them, make it hard for them to immediately? That he's trying to make you want to come on the continent, right? Come to the land, get on the land. They were just harassing them, like soldiers harassing boats on the water. All right, we can quickly go on to the 1500s. King Nzinga of Marembo, Congo, Angola. He made a statement. I was actually protesting to the Europeans. He made a statement: "My people's will. It is my people's will that there shall be no trading of slaves or markets for slaves." Right? Again, these people are saying African kings just sold themselves. They're just not being, they're being ahistorical, or maybe they've not checked the records. In the 1600s, Queen Nzinga of Mbandi. So we've seen King Nzinga Marembo and our Queen Nzinga Mbandi. Both of them from the Congo, Angola area, which was a huge swath of land, like present-day Angola and some. She fought a 30-year war against slavery. In the late 1600s, the early 1700s, Donna Beatrice Kimpavita, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it well, maybe it's Kimpavita, she also coming from the same area, was waging some serious armed struggle, late 1600s to early 1700s. They said the people that did the Stono Rebellion in the U.S., many of them were adherents to his philosophy, and that was basically to abolish slavery. Okay, so just gonna go let's go with a time thing. Let's look at it in that kind of order. So 1703, Anomabo in Ghana, Africans. So a group of Africans just cut some English enslavement. Just look at the mindset. Why are they doing all this? They want to discourage slavery. Right? They cut an English enslaver who had brought money to buy some African slaves, and they made him buy his own life with the money he had brought to buy Africans. Right? Then there's in Benin, Dahomey. We hear a lot about how Benin was the center of slavery. True, there were people who were pushing that, but all these things we have to think of them in terms of time. Because there'll be a time where you have another ruler that says, no, we don't want this in our terrain. Right? And then you have other rulers who succumb to the bigger project. I am interested in people like Aglaja Chodo, was a ruler in Benin, late 1700s. He arrested some enslavers, freed their captives, and sent them back to go tell their, fellow white people, European enslavers, that death awaited them if they came to his terrain to capture slaves. 1681, Cape Coast. People say stuff like, fancy people, they just sold out, they were just sitting there doing nothing. That's not true. We already talked about Kwame Nkrumah harassing European arrivals, right? In Cape Coast, locals attacked the English Royal African Company in Second D. They attacked the fort, the governor was beheaded. That was the English Royal African Company's fort over there. In Cape Coast, they just attacked this, the Cape Coast Castle, in an attempt to free slaves. So now, if in Second D, they've gone ahead and killed the governor, right, cut off his head, we're going to find out that was not just one incident, right? This was something that was happening, At least we're going to talk about one more example here. In Sierra Leone, Africans went in and destroyed the slave quarters of one infamous slave dealer called John Osborne. People call him Mungo John. He was selling slaves to white people, and the Africans just went and destroyed the captive quarters and set the captives free. Basically, they built the forts and the barracoons to protect themselves and the captured Africans, right, mainly from foreign vessels, because they were afraid that, let's say, the Dutch could attack the British spot and take the people or whatever, right? But if you look at it closely, it wasn't working because the Africans would scale the walls, right? Climb the walls, ram the gates, find something heavy to knock the gates, attack the guards over there. It's combat. We're fighting. Most of the time to free people they didn't know. Look, you know what I mean? This is something we need to really bear in mind. Okay, so Fort St. Louis and Gorée in Senegal, Fort James in Gambia, Fort Bansay or Banke, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, in Sierra Leone. They were all on islands because they realized that when they had it on the land, they would be bothered or terrorized by these Africans a lot, right? But the Africans attacked anyway, though they were on the water. And that's what he's speaking about when we see them approaching the boats. And later he makes a point about how even on the barracoons they realized that they had to protect their own lives. It wasn't really about just the business they were doing, but they themselves were in danger. As some of the illustrations have indicated. So the Africans attacked anyway, and in Fort St. Louis, in Senegal, for instance, they had to shut down business. They had to shut down the slave trade for at least 6 years. Of course, they will try to move around and try to find other ways to work it out, but they were getting the message that this was not going to work here as long as these particular people were around. 1727, captives at the Dutch Christenberg Castle, that's in the Gold Coast, Christenberg, right? We all know where Christenberg there, right? They battled the guards over there and slew the governor, right? This is an example of Africans going all the way, killing the governor, fighting the guards, killing the governor, because they wanted to free other Africans who were not necessarily coming from their hometown. Well, just that you have African captives they were going to risk a lot. Many times they failed in these attempts. They could get killed themselves, but they would do these things to let you know that no, we're not having the slavery thing in these parts. That move on the Christenberg Castle, for instance, many Africans escaped. It was a successful one. There's a little story about it in 1730. There's a white guy who came with a ship called Little George. His name is George Scott. He talks about captured Africans themselves seizing the ship while it was on the water. They didn't know they never studied how to sail boats, but they found a way to, drive the boat back to the shore. They had locked the white people in some rooms in there, and they got off the boat and left the white people there, right? Later, other people had to come rescue them. But this gives you a sense that Africans were doing their own thing to get free, But I'm trying to emphasize the fact that even those who were not in chains were also combating this arrangement consistently, there was an attack that killed one Captain W. Potter. His ship's name was the Perfect. Oh, that's not the point. He was trying to buy 300 Africans. While he was doing that, people attacked him and killed him. Got on the ship, destroyed the ship. The captains who were about to be paid for were set free. 1764, Sierra Leone, the ship called Adventure. The captives on the boat themselves this time broke free and slew the captain, Captain Miller, and most of the crew. Then they said the Negroes, this is how the statement goes, the Negroes came from the shore. This means people who were not captives and killed the surviving men and took the ship. The people who were in chains had already broken free. There's another man called, I'm coming up with these names not because they're important, but, just to give us a sense we're dealing with some concrete. A gentleman, one of slavers, I call him a gentleman, C.B. Watstrong, he's writing and he talks about how he saw Africans drive back a loaded ship of Africans. By the way, sometimes even when they were forcing African workers to load slaves onto the ship, sometimes they decided not to do. Let's remember the world economy was not revolving around slavery. So to have a job sometimes would mean you have to work, do that business. But many of them were like, no. And there were moments where they would say, no, we're not going to do the job. We need to get paid. But you force us into this economy. But sometimes they'll be like, nah. So these are other acts of resistance, so to speak, that we're dealing with, they drove the ship back to the shore. The natives were determined, this is his words, Watstrong's words. The natives were determined to retaliate. Retaliate what? What you've done to us, right? So they boarded the vessel, seized the ship, and killed most of the crew. In 1768, Africans attacked Côte d'Or, what's Côte Gold or something, ship from France on the River Bonny. That's like River State, Nigeria, the area. Heavily armed with guns and knives, they boarded the ship and freed the captured Africans, right? In 1778, now we're talking about these examples of people who are Muslims, right? That's why we don't have to say, oh, Muslims were, part of this thing. There's an imam in the Senegambia area who made it illegal for enslavers to pass captured Africans through his territory. The French Senegal Company, the one we talked about at the start, they sent him gifts when he passed that law, like, oh yeah, at least you can just give us a preferential treatment so we can be able to bring these slaves through your terrain. And he said he returned the gifts, and he said, I would not let all the riches from the company divert me from my plan to fight slavery. Right? This imam represents how the Africans felt, the will of the African people. Right? When you hear about other people doing other things, we cannot say that was the will of the African people. The will, we can talk about it. Late 17th century to early 18th century, late 1700s to early 1800s, in Fouta Djallon in Guinea and Fouta Toro, and an area called Bondu, there were Muslim leaders, who said their terrain you can't bring any captured Africans through their terrain too, and they were actually recognized as no say anti-slavery terrains, right? The white people knew that if they went there, it was going to be a problem for them. In a letter to the British authorities, the Fouta leader called Abdel Kader Kane, he promised death to any slave dealers that were found on his turf, in his territory. So we get a sense of how people feel in Africa, right? Now, I spent a lot of time talking about the African continent. I'm just going to dip quickly to Haiti and then come back, or to the west quickly and come back to Africa. So Dessalines, Jean-Jacques Dessalines. Now, Dessalines is someone that we could spend a whole year talking about. He became, Haiti is the first nation, especially of captured Africans, right? Slave nation, so to speak, that abolished slavery. But they were ahead of Britain and America, right? England abolished slavery, actually abolished slavery in 1807, right? In Haiti, it was 1804, early January 1804. They had finished a long war, gotten free, finally whipped the French a couple times, let them understand that they can't come and do any slavery over there or try to take the land. And then he declared that, look, man, if you want to do slavery, or if you dare want to colonize and enslave African people, we're going to kill you all, including people who are not involved in slavery. if you are a white person, where you seem to be connected to the French people, you're going to be a target. So yeah, a few months later, he passed an order where some people call it a crazy order, but he went out. He ordered that there was a massacre of white people, to put it mildly. They just kill white people just to discourage them from bringing up around the adventure. They defeated Napoleon's armies and all that, and now they were handling the white people. He said, if you're going to stay in Haiti, you have to see that you're in a black nation. He's going to regard you as black. If you can't deal with it, get out of the country. And he said things like, he knows that people interested in slavery will consider him a terror and will curse the day that he was born. Now he was abolishing slavery right there, right? But he's bringing an African sentiment. Matter of fact, he says things like that in some of his speeches, and he talks about the fact that he's following a certain law, right? And that's the law that we've seen is guiding these actions of all these people we're talking about who are saying no slavery in my terrain, or we're going to get on a ship and free our people and destroy who stands in our way and all that. Is that we can't have this here. So one thing of Naturna, they're not basically give a process, all the self-help moves that were made in Americas against slavery, the Quilombos in Brazil and all that. The Maroons, even though we have some situations with Maroons cooperated with the British, generally the idea was to abolish slavery or to get free from slavery. Now it looks like it's almost one, and my next examples are going to be similar. So let me just say one quick thing about Menelik, back to Africa. People talk about Menelik enslaved people, right? But these are his own words to let us see how he was actually thinking about it. Remember, we live in a world where slavery in itself was not
culture.
In itself as an idea was normal, right? But this is Menelik speaking. He says, if you find any man, he was speaking to another leader, and he was saying that let's stop the slavery thing. You guys stop the slavery thing. Obviously, he wasn't invested in it, right? So he's saying, if you find any man stealing and raiding a slave in the towns or villages, bring him to me. I will give him to you, right? So he's getting this guy to spread word among his people that, look, I will give him to you and your grandchildren as a slave. You will enslave him, tie him up, and force him to work for you. Now, this may sound a little coarse, right? Not so fine, but check this out. He was seeing slavery as punishment in a world where slavery was normal. But he's saying, we're going to enslave the enslaver as punishment to discourage them from enslaving people. He's going to give this enslaver over to you to go enslave them. But that's his mindset. But he says something very interesting to another instance. He says, don't label people as a slave. Like when you own someone, in quotes, don't label them as a slave. Don't say you own them like belongings. No human, this is Menelik speaking. No human being is a slave as such. All of us are slaves to the one God only. And we all know about Menelik, to study Menelik, that he spent a lot of time sending forces out to destroy slave markets. They go there and they just destroy the place, and all that was in the spirit of abolishing slavery. I just want to end real quick by reminding each other that, Selassie was all about abolishing slavery. He did it in so many different steps. So that they give credit to Italy for making it end. No, he was already doing things. And he had to deal with the culture was deeply ingrained. That's how a lot of people were making a living. So that's come to a point where he said, look, anybody in chains or in slavery can just find a way to stand in front of a judge and declare they're free. Once you declare that, you're free. Nobody has the right to come get you. Rastafari, Selassie, Now, when we're talking about abolishing slavery, early on I indicated that slavery was a way that reformulated not just economics, politics, it's just knowledge in itself, and actually reformulated the way our senses were arranged. Just like you're living in this kind of world, it will reformulate. I mean, anything that's major in your world right now is reformulating your thinking. Our world right now is reformulating our thinking. I'm concluding here by saying that if we are thinking of abolishing slavery, we have to think about abolishing the knowledge system, the ideas, the ontologies, what is it, the understanding of what existence is, what categories are, what is a being. all that. We have to take a stand, take a pause, and tell ourselves that these ideas are coming from Europe, no matter how much we dress them in African clothes. We have our own way of seeing things, locked in, evolving to. And if we're really talking about abolishing, we shouldn't just go for we have to abolish their politics too, which we seem to be so invested in. Now it doesn't mean that overnight, right? Some people deal with it, but those of us who have ideas about something else, we have to really get in there. These are supposed to be totally destroyed because all these things are tied into that philosophy, which holds one race superior and another inferior. That's where Africa is in this present state. So the abolishing project is about abolishing your way of knowing completely. So I'll end it here. Let's have a discussion about this. Really interested in what Adrians have to say.
Yes. You're still logged in on the Rastafari Council of Ghana bi-weekly lecture. Today's lecture is on the topic Africans were the first abolitionists. Africans were the first abolitionists. And the speaker has been Ras Kwesi Anoche. It's now question and comment time. Please stay with us on Radio Culture. Radio Culture.
With the presenter we can put forth. So please, we now invite comments and questions. Yes, sir. Yes, my lord, please come.
Give thanks, Ras Kwesi, for such an insightful and brilliant presentation. I think that when we talk about abolition, sometimes the focus is too much on the physical abolition. I think that you made it very clear that when we're talking about abolition, we are abolishing everything that is a colonizing force. And that includes their ways of knowing, their ways of governance, their ways of trade, and their ways of, everything. And we are emphasizing our ways. So I give thanks for that. I think that also another point that came through is strongly is that most of the time when we hear discussions on slavery, the whole idea is that the Africans were just sitting down, waiting, and the white man just came and just took our people away and sent them to the West. And I think you've given us a whole lot of examples of that not being the case. And I think that one recent one that we also should bring in mind is, I want to say in 2016 or 2015, somewhere the Dutch, I believe, returned the decapitated head of King Bedu Bonsu, who was the king of the Ahanta people of the coastal region of Ghana. Now, this was after much agitation by the people, and his head had been kept in a glass cage in that cold part of Europe. Now, the thing is, when they talk about King Bedu Bonsu, they don't talk about why they felt the need to cut off his head. And the main thing that was going on with King Bedu Bonsu was that he was organizing his people to attack the white people who were there to enslave the Africans on a consistent basis. In fact, there was an issue that precipitated in the cutting of his head where, they gathered 3 whites and just cut off their heads, right, and brought it to King Bedu Bonsu. And then that also resulted in the retaliation of his head being cut and sent to the Netherlands or wherever that they sent it to. So I think it's very important to highlight these kinds of instances because it requires a reset of the mind. These days when you're using the word reset, you have to be very careful because you have entered into the political phrase. But it's a great contribution to how we can look at this story. There is a popular saying that if we don't tell our own story, the hunter always is going to project himself as the victor, and we don't get to tell our story. So, there are many instances. I think that with that, as you have shown, that the resistance has been from day one, right?
Exactly.
Black people have always been the first abolitionists because to resist the very idea of being enslaved. So, I'm going to pause here for right now and allow somebody else to make a contribution. Give thanks. Rastafari.
Give thanks. My brethren does, as always, man, thanks for that. You're just enriched one's understanding of things through just few moments of you speaking too. Just give me a thought when you said the head in cut off. Some people will be like, wasn't worth it. You did all this and they cut off your head. Fanon has something very interesting. He says, man, since we have to celebrate all attempts all revolts, all attempts to get these guys off our backs, including the failed attempts, right? So some people go, oh, you did all this and they cut off your head, so why do you want to do it? No, if you don't want to do it, cool. But if someone's going to go do it, yeah, we salute that person. Failed attempts are equally, sometimes, let's put it this way, they're as important as successful attempts. Not just in this area, just about every other area.
They are expression of our human rights, as
Thank you.
Our determination to remain and be human, right? Give thanks.
Give thanks, McGregor.
Radio culture.
I would like to ask this notion that slavery still exists through our corporate way. This kind of 8 to 5 work is another form of slavery. I'd like to ask, what do you think about that?
I agree. I totally agree. Who knows, 20 years from now, 100 years from now, people look back and say, man, look how people lived. Right? We're in it. So sometimes we may think, this is normal, but look at the pain and agony people go through. Look at the diseases people are coming up because of this. Right? The trauma people have to deal with, the fear of falling off a payroll. Yes. Can't pay my bills. But it's tied to the economics that we're dealing with, right? We're dealing with economics that's premised on this idea of one race is superior and others inferior. So if I just go work hard and get a better paycheck, and I'm letting that philosophy stay put, as a Ras, it's not to tell us already. We have to try to wipe the slate clean. Sometimes people are like, we don't have anything to work with. Not true. We got plenty to work with. As Brethren always, point out, we have so much to work with. To be able to say we're turning our backs on what their ideas are shouldn't be something that scares us. And people like to say, oh, this is all we got, so let's manage with it. Big mistake. Then we're perpetrating the same Babylon system. No matter how much I hail you as my brethren, as a rise, So yeah, slavery is happening that way too. And I don't know if I'm answering it the way you expected it, but basically I'm saying that everything, the knowledge system that we're dealing with, all areas of endeavor are, if we're dealing with discourse as we know it, are tied into slavery. So we have to abolish all of that. All of that. In your area, you should know you're combating slavery. Even if it's black people, we're dealing with good black people. That area, tell yourself you're combating it. If we're dealing with modern conceptual thinking. When I say modern, I'm just saying ideas based on the world Europe created, including our post-colonial ideas. Some of our post-colonial ideas, let's say.
Yes, my lord.
Yes,
Please, do we have any other comments, questions, suggestions, or additions? Daddy Bosco joined us. So, Mr. President, you're welcome to the reasoning. Yeah, the presenter is done with the reasoning and we are taking comments, suggestions. So, Daddy B, welcome. My lord, please come in, Prof. Will.
Yes, I give thanks. And, I wanted to say that another thing that you also articulated, because, there's this idea that for instance, the people who were sent to the Western world from Africa were just, some group of people in Africa, and the white man just came and, the people in Africa just sold that group of people, and, that group of people ended up in the West. But that could not be further from the truth, right? I think that it is very important to advance the idea of anyone could be taken, right? That's how a whole lot of our chiefs and our queen mothers and our priests and priestesses and men and women of high authority ended up in the right. A typical example is the case of the village of Atoko, which is in the Volta region, right? And they used trickery. What they did was they brought the boat, onto the coast and sent a message to the royal family over there and all the supporters of the royal family, and told them that we're having we're inviting you to come on board ship. We're going to kind of treat you all to some kind of festive occasion. And so when the king and all his people in his court went onto the ship, then the Europeans captured them the Western world. So, absolutely. And there are many, many more instances of such. And that's why, we see, even in the Western world, how, men of authority and women of authority ended up there, because anyone could be taken. First of all, what they did was to destabilize the whole political structures that were here prior to their arrival, and that having happened created a room for anybody to be kidnapped. In fact, the whole terminology of slave trade, in my humble opinion, should be just maybe not humble in this case, but just be abolished, right? And look at more like slave kidnapping.
That's what it was. Robbery, thieving people. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And of course, the whole case is made about, the people in the motherland also being involved. As if everybody in the motherland just decided that we're going to go and sell some people over here. But the fact of the matter is, of course, there were some elites who were involved. And,
hustlers. A lot of hustlers look greedy for money. Yeah. But most of the people,
No, most of the people were against
the will of the whole thing. No.
Just as it happened in the Americas, right? Mm-hmm. And let's not forget that even in the Americas, you had black people here who were still conniving with a white man, who were enslaving other black people. This occurred in the Americas. You understand what I'm saying? So there's always the situation. We have tip in the eastern
Zanzibar area. Start making his money.
Absolutely. But that doesn't mean that most of the people in Zanzibar, Tanzania, we share the same ideas as tip.
The majority did not. The majority
absolutely were totally against, because guess what? The people who were taken away were our father, our brother, our sister, our cousin, our relative. Nobody wanted their to be absconded and sent to something that somewhere they don't know, right? So that needs to be emphasized. But again, we got to tell our own story. And the question is, we can't leave these things to the government agencies alone, right? Because we have seen the kind of textbook they're writing for our young people to study. I think that some of these things have to be sessions like this coming up, and things can come out of that where such information will be made available to one-on-one. So, man, give thanks for such reason. That's the problem.
I just wanted to add one quick one when you're talking about people being taken, there were people who actually work with the white people, right? Work hard, help them capture the rest of us. And then when they come on the ship, they knock them, add them to us. Now we are the insider team. You just say you're free. So some people who ended up in the West were initially working for the white people too.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? So it was just arbitrary,
Arbitrary.
African. Yeah.
Yeah.
Give thanks. Rastafari greetings, one and all.
Give thanks.
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
And give thanks for the reasoning. We're live on Radio Culture. I have one quick comment to make. But before that, I want to also reiterate the fact that was originally stated by the speaker and already reiterated by Prof. Wiro. But I also want to add, because I just got some recent knowledge, so to speak, that there was actually some groups of people, families almost, tribes even, that dedicated themselves to forming some type of a quasi-police force to defend the slavers over there in slavery, like over there in the West, right? There were people who still struggled and clawed their way to get the favor of those who had enslaved them, so they could form a middle buffer type of they get certain comfort, certain perks, certain recognitions. And so I just want to reiterate that. So slavery is a very complex story to tell. Very, very, very complex story to tell, especially when you're dealing with diverse people from diverse backgrounds. Like as we speak right now, if you have people from, say, people that would call themselves African Americans seated among us, they would feel differently from how we feel, because sometimes our experiences may be different. And so we have to all be very open when we are speaking about slavery, so that we can all find a common story, no matter how bitter that truth is. And then we can move on from there. But let me also say that because we are speaking about abolition today, let's think of the Salaga Wall and icons like that. Some that we don't even know about. Again, like I was saying, I got some recent knowledge. Part of that recent knowledge I got was that there were chiefs in the North who abolished slavery to the point where they're like, even if you are suspected of being a collaborator with the enslavers, the punishment you had to bear, and not just you, your family had to bear, they made it very unattractive for you to be a collaborator, so that even your own family member could dub you in because they don't want to face the wrath of the king, right? The king says, when you go through this. So one of your nephews can go and dub you in because they know that, this guy, if they catch him, me too, I go suffer that fate. That's the wisdom that the king was facing that whole thing with. There were people, the Salaga Wall, there are stories of people who were buried in the foundation of the wall as a deterrent to other people who will be collaborators. So they were building a wall to defend people, right? They had a clarion call. If you hear that call, it means the slavers are around. Run and hide behind the wall. Run for the wall. But that wall, while they were building it, what they did was that people who, number one, were too lazy to chip in. Not that if you are sick and you can't chip in, fine. But who they often say, I did where I am because I said, I won't chip in. I won't build it with the moon from us. When they catch you. Number two, when you are collaborating with the slave raiders. Number three, when you are a slave raider yourself. When they caught you, they put you in the foundation of the wall and built the wall over you, so that it will be a deterrent for other people who would think of doing something abominable like that, right? Now, with all that said, the last point I also want to make is that when we talk about the slavery thing, and I'm very happy that we have Raskwesi, who has broken it down for us like that. Let's not look at slavery from the same perspective, right? Up till today, we have the name Donko. Easily, we can trace that too. But again, even within Ghana, when we say Donko, I don't look at somebody who's called Donko and say, no, you're Donko. We said, then you. Donko was allowed to marry the master's child.
Thank you.
If the Donko is smart enough, Donko, master name himself, Babema. But Babema no can sankwan or or sorry, and the one so bad no be first can if you know the Korean son. Meanwhile, he has a Donko who is sharp, and he also has a daughter. Why I not go make my Donko marry my daughter so that he will take care of the estate that I'm going to leave behind and bring up some sharp children for me while he's at it, right? So let's always make that clear distinction so that when you are faced with situations where some people are trying to be like, oh, but Africans were already enslaving themselves. Oh, but you sold us into slavery. That you sold us into slavery thing, I think it's a session that has to be had on its own.
Yeah,
I think
it's
so.
a white people idea, man. Let's just face it. It's white people. Why did I was trying to ask, why did they say the Jews caused us Hitler to hurt us? They never blamed the Jewish collaborators, and there were a lot of them.
But you see, Kwesi, Russ, you don't hear white people saying that though. That's the sad part. We hear our brethren and our sisters saying that.
I hear taught them that line of reasoning.
But that's what I'm saying though. So we have to deal with it among I and I, because they may have thrown out the seed, but we are reaping the fruit, right? Because right now, we cannot trust ourselves as a people, because one group of us think that we were sold, right, by the other group of people over there. And I always make the example. Yafa scatter. You know, Ghana in scatter. Yafa scatter an example. Yes, a groom be woman. Yes, a ghetto. Yes, not scatter pie. Scatter pie. Na papa no be scaly. Papa no e jane no ko. Right? E bi muso anje so fast. No, ya chi omo. Na say adene ba omo muskeli wo no mutimi jane ye no. Are they responsible for mona ye chi omo no ana? No. Let's yeah, seriously. Let's just open our minds to certain things, and then where apologies have to be given. Now, let's give the apologies by those who have to give the apology. Because as we speak, there are people who still thump them chest, say, yeah, we are the ones who used to do this and that. I was talking to one sister, and you go shock, Rasta, in this day and age. She was freely telling me, say, she comes from a lineage where they had a slave house in the back of their house. They can't share with the family of their lineage. Say, even in their family house, no, they had some type of they built it like a cell behind their house where they used to hoard slaves until these people would come and want to buy them. They know themselves. So let's not be like, oh, okay, we sold them into slavery, fight them with Operation Joseph and all that nonsense that some time ago some government was trying to come up with. That's all nonsense. Let's dig deep and let's tell the story as it is, so that we can heal the wounds as they should be healed. And just like the plaster better it is when we have a headache. Enough times.
Rastafari. Charlie, I give thanks for those insights, man. Anybody has thoughts on that? I love how you call it abominable, though, you know, if you see it like that. You know, and serious points to make a job, love it. Good thanks, you know.
Radio culture.
Rastafari. Yes, sir. So I have some input. I like the fact that we've been encouraged to not just see the physical end to enslavement, but to go ahead with the mental, political, historical, and even economic, every other forms that enslavement took. But my input here may seem maybe would digress a little. I
love that.
Heard an argument about the 13th Amendment, where a presenter was making the case that, yes, like we are trying to establish, Africans abolish slavery because it's innate in them not to entertain or encourage it. But for Europeans, because they benefited from slavery, we cannot even say that to date we have abolished slavery. Looking at the 13th Amendment that says that slavery is abolished, but only as a punishment for crime. That means that crime is used as an avenue to further enslave black people. And so for I even see the fight for decriminalization as fighting slavery, because through criminalization of persons that use cannabis, a lot of black people, we find ourselves in prisons, and then we return to chattel enslavement through the process. They call it the prison industrial system. And so through prisons, still black people are still being made slaves in every part of the world, especially in the West. But even here in Africa, Ghana, for possession of something like herb, healing, one can be incarcerated. And then also, there is also the idea of modern slavery, even at the north of Africa. It is believed Africans who try crossing over from the north to try to go to Europe through the North Africa, when they are enslaved. It's like when the system gets hold of them, they are enslaved. Recently, I just did a search for modern slavery, and it's like, yes, they give evidence of slavery still going on in Egypt and other parts of North Africa, as if slavery has never been abolished. And so, even though we are discussing the abolishment of slavery, physically, especially within North Africa, and also the use of crime still continue to re-enslave black people. And so this is the little comment that I wanted to put. Maybe the presenter will shed some light on that. I give that.
No, I appreciate what you're saying. You're saying some very important things. I was just two quick thoughts that hit me was when you said the criminalization and all that, like this is an aside, I was reading this bit about how the time where Africans from Cromartin go to Jamaica, they'd be one of the main forces where they forced the British to abolish slavery. So they make it like, oh, they were just good guys, Wilberforce and people, they're just good people. And they'd be like, no, there was some serious things that were happening that was messing up their sense of self. The dignity when it comes to being a British was being squandered the longer they held on to slavery. Because the cities Africans, when they arrived from present-day Ghana, one quote said, it must be warriors and criminals because they're too impatient. They want us to be patient. But these brothers and sisters, when they land low, they started fighting. That was in Jamaica, and they were making some serious moves over there, So yeah, I just want to say that they call us criminals for any kind of reason where they go use to justify their thing, Another point you made was basically the world arrangement. We, as Prof. Rio was saying, we tried to touch on there a little, before that, was we are fighting not just what they present to us as the problem. We have another problem with the way they understand the world. Their idea of knowledge itself is what has to be wiped off our screens. You see, we have to come to that place that's to be more serious about, their ideas are a big problem. The ideas that they founded the world of knowledge on. And most of the time when we go to school, I study philosophy, I'll study Aristotle as a pillar. As much as I disagree with him, I'm not careful, I'll be in conversation with him. I don't want to be in conversation with Aristotle or Plato. I do not. Yeah, if you write an essay and they try to argue with Aristotle, then they give you good marks. Oh, you made a nice life. I'm not interested in talking to him. They don't exist. True. Yeah. I want to listen to the person who never hear of Aristotle's ideas, rather. So we have to enter that space where we're like, we don't have to care about the idea. We have to learn them to know why the world is as it is today. And through the discussions, we learn a lot. Some of the things where Jah Beloved threw into the story. Thank you, Jah Beloved, for those insights. Prof. Rio, Russ, enjoy your questions. Things like that. They bring us to where things are at, right? And then we turn our backs on that. We are not in conversation with the world. Listen, they're not even interested in our ideas. No matter how much they clap while we talk and give us all whatever, they're not interested in the ideas, man. So we're not for being interested in having conversations with them. You know, if we want to abolish this thing, we have to speak our own conceptual language.
Absolutely. It is important because we have our own way of looking at the world, and that's why. Let me give an example, maybe not a very palatable one, but it's one that is contemporary as well, right?
Those are the ones we want to hear, man. The unpalatable ones.
So, like, if you look, for instance, at the church situation and the relationship of the church regarding the LGBTQ community, it is interesting to see that the no matter where you look at it, the church that comes out of Africa is the one that is really fighting hard for that thing not to enter into the African world. And the church that is coming out of Europe is saying, this is okay. I mean, we have to embrace everybody. Now, what is the point that I'm making? The point I'm making is that these two polar opposite way of thinking is informed by our ways of knowing, by our foundational ideologies. So in Africa, the foundational ideology, which was there before the African Anglican Church or the African Roman Catholic Church, all these kind of churches came, is that everything we do has to promote life, right? The European ideology, that is not central to it. It's more of enjoyment, right? Everything you do has to be focused on enjoyment. So this, talking about Aristotle and Plato, I mean, look at their personal lives. Some of these were known to be pedophiles, even though they were philosophers. You understand what I'm saying? So these ideologies are also informing the way we see the world today. Therefore, we cannot, as Africans, just wholeheartedly accept, their ways of knowing and their ways of doing things, because we have ours. And as it's a human right to advance our ways of knowing and our ways of doing things. Now, I want to touch some that Ras Kofi Asante also mentioned. The first one being the 13th Amendment. The 13th Amendment, absolutely, as you put it, states that freedom is not guaranteed to anyone who has basically committed a criminal offense. In other words, the state is permitted to establish prisons and incarcerate people who have committed offenses and have those people work for free. Now, we all know that anytime you're working for free, what we call that in common English parlance is, enslavement or slavery. So, in other words, slavery is permitted if you are criminalized. And therefore, this allows for the criminalization of Black people. Now, let's look at it from another angle. And I think Ras Kofi Asante also mentioned this. But if it didn't, I'm going to throw it in there. The whole idea of criminalization of ganja also came as a result of Black people using the herb and them saying that, what?
Absolutely.
We want to stop these people and criminalize them and, make them go work for us for free. So all these things are linked. And all these things are also linked to the whole idea that North Africa today feel like they have the right to enslave Black Africans. And again, in America here, if you go someplace where they go for some folks, they have all the racial categories on the form. They will ask you which of these you belong to. white or Caucasian, and under the white or Caucasian, they put in the Arab or people who have Middle Eastern origin. What's the point I'm trying to make? The point I'm trying to make is that the North Africans, they don't see themselves as Africans, Black Africans, as we see ourselves, right? They, in fact, we don't even need to go far to see that. In football, soccer, they go join the Arab League, they go for their own Arab AFCON. And then when they finish, they come play for the black one AFCON to join, right? So what the point you're trying to make is that somehow, because they don't allow countries such as Nigeria or Ghana to go join the Arab people, them are soccer tournament, but they come join the one under the guise of Africa. So the point being that those people have never seen themselves as equal to we. They've always seen themselves as superior to we. And even, look, it's not just North Africa. It's going on in Saudi Arabia. It's going on in Kuwait, all these other countries where our sisters are being literally enslaved, right? And horrible things happening to them. Now, I think that all this speaks to the fact that it is also time that we articulate some of these things. We make our voices loud and strong on these kind of happenings. We cannot sit in any corner of the world today and allow for any of our brothers and sisters to be enslaved just because they are passing through a country. But then again, the people who are supposed to be doing the talking, let's take our so-called governments for instance, who are really not our governments, but just satellites of the Western system. They don't even know some of these things, or if they know, they just close a blind eye to it because nobody is saying it. And like Rasmus said, this might just do it against slavery. In fact, as a young rap, one of the things he took in Ethiopia was to work against the abolishing or the abolishment of the system of slavery that existed in Ethiopia, and by extension, connecting that to the worldwide system of slavery, and the need to abolish that. So, other African countries that we have on the continent today, and the leaders of these countries, they are not voicing anything when it comes to the enslavement of our brothers and sisters in Libya, in Algeria, in Saudi Arabia, and
Mauritania.
Right, but this is where Rastafari can come in. Mauritania.
Yes.
You can put pressure on them by making these things, part of the media landscape on a daily basis to the extent that they have to do something about it. We shouldn't underestimate the power of our voice, right? We can use our voice to bring about some of these kind of changes that are necessary, especially as it pertains to iron and black people. Give thanks.
Give thanks. Because that could be me. That could be me over there in Libya. That could be me in Mauritania. Yeah.
Yes, right.
Yes.
No doubt.
Yes. And it's the same thing that motivated the people who attack the coffles or storm the fort. They know what say, oh, this guy from, Baku, Emir from, Kita, so I don't worry. No, it's like it could be me. So we want this thing scrapped, Yeah. That's the thing. Give thanks, bros.
Rastafari.
Yes, sir. Daddy B. Daddy B, there. Anybody want to share something?
Radio, culture.
Greetings to the house.
Greetings,
bro. Yeah, it's been a while,
good to hear you. Good to hear you out, man.
I'm enjoying the conversation, and it's in the right direction. From seeing the slavery
aspects from our media perspective, relating to the type of content that is being shown on the screen, the television, the program aspect. We have some types of movie that are foreign movies, but our people over here have translated it into our local languages. So you based on interpreted in our local languages. So I see the media aspect too is contributing to some kind of mental slavery, and still the slavery is going on. Give thanks. Serious. Give thanks. I miss a lot of the things you say, but you say make a serious point. We shouldn't just tie to, like Vice Prof was saying, we shouldn't just tie to the physical, the mental slavery part is major. Give thanks. Give thanks, Give thanks, Rasmali. Yeah. And it'll be important to say we go come up with programs that go counter that. If you come up with stories, TV shows, whatever we have to just put something else on people's minds, because the things on people's minds is what determines their actions, their behavior. That's why it's important to say we go, anyone who have ideas about making programs, movies, music, things that will actually alter the way we see the world. Those are the things we need. Give thanks. Yes, brethren. Give thanks. Go ahead, sir.
Machine learning out the human efficiency to explain ourselves. They can hear, can they listen, elaborate, yet can they feed it. They salute in a proxy war.
We can touch a little bit on what the brethren just, share with us. A very, very important thing, because, I think that, the TV has changed, back home. When we were kids, I feel say there was a lot more content that projected African cultural values, even though we still had the Hawaii Five-O and those kind of shows which were, projecting the Western values. We also had, on Sundays, we used to have a program where it was by the fireside or something like that, like Nancy Simmons stuff, that kind of thing. And this whole kind of new thing where they go take some build the top of India, and then they do overdub, so to speak, right? Overdub, and then they speak the TNT, and the Indians will be in the background and thing. One time, they say they call something Kukumbacha or something, and they do it this time. We say Rasta, you go see for church inside and thing. Everybody talk about Kukumbacha, and I ask myself saying, if we day here, we don't understand. Saying, if we're discussing Kukumbacha, we are also importing the values of India into our system. It's even more so if the whole thing is being done in the language that we all understand, right? So the media landscape has to cater to our way of seeing things as well. It has to articulate the African worldview that we are talking about. It has to be a participant in the abolition of this kind of mental slavery that is being advanced by these programs on the television. So give thanks to the brethren for sharing that.
Give thanks. I wanted to just say something real quick to tag on to what you're saying. Now, you're just saying that the governments, we can't wait on governments to do it, right? We can't wait on anyone else. So if you did it right now, any of us not here, or brethren we know, sisters we know, youth, where they want to do something, it's along the lines of what we really want to say and what we really want. We have to encourage them. We can't be waiting on other people. You know, these days, it may sound crazy, but you can do a lot of things on your phone. A lot of things were 20 years ago, you know, if you do, there'll be free software. So that we want to do the high fidelity 8K, 16K, whatever resolution works. But you'll be surprised that you can make something that may not be 8K or 4K or even HD. We're going to have an impact. But at the same time, we're going to rally for resources and do some of the, whatever, high resolution, best editing, best whatever that they talk about. But what I mean is that let's produce our own content. Let's not hold ourselves back and be saying, oh, this is not there. That is not there. As soon as we see that it's not there, we have to jump in and make something happen. Slushy had that vibe going where it's like, you have to do it. We're trying to get past the obstacles rather than talk about them. So there was a moment where Slushy appointed someone to her the project. And the guy's like, I haven't been trained for this. Slushy said, you can do it. Learn what you have to learn and do it. Yeah, it's in your ballpark. Just go learn it and do it, So we have to start, giving ourselves permission to try things. Greetings, Study B.
Yes, sorry I couldn't join at the start, but I just want to commend ones and ones for this wonderful initiative, to the speaker and to everybody on the platform. Sometimes these things we do not even know the impact it will be making. But I strongly believe that now that we're putting them online, it will be a reference material for people down the road. So big respects to all the speakers and all participants. This last year.
Rastafari, and to Russ Edjo for making that happen. Always give thanks. Give thanks. A lot of work, Bridget.
Yes. Large.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Please, any more comments? Son of man, courage. Yeah, we've not heard from you. The boss. You've all not made any comments yet. So if you still have any questions, any input.
Hey, Brad Courage, at least make we hear you cough.
We still have about 11 minutes to the end of the reasoning, and so I'm still taking input, comments, suggestions, anything you didn't understand.
So although I joined late, so I don't know what has really been discussed. But what about this issue where the narrative seems to be that continental Africans sold their kindred into slavery?
That's just what we were going through. That's what we reasoned through. That's basically that was the issue that we were dealing with. That's what motivated the topic and all that. Actually, this quote, Africans were the first abolitionists, was by a Nigerian professor who was teaching the U.S. for a while. Extraordinary man, Dr. Mwabweze Okoye. Very on point. He's a guy who's teaching in class and he blasted the Queen of England. And one student runs off to go tell the president of the university that this guy, the professor, is disrespecting the Queen of England. So the president of the university invites him over, and he goes in. The president says, "I want to discuss this issue with you. The student is complaining that you're disrespecting the Queen of England." he just shut the president down and told him, say, have you read the literature? And the president had to shut up, and he left. So this is the kind of temperament. This guy's a fighter, right? And he came up with this thing. I was talking to him, and he was talking about how, just what you're saying, people say Africans sold their people into slavery, like we're complacent and all that. You know, he was talking about another way. He was thinking more about Africans in America. And he was saying that Africans in America were the first abolitionists right then. You know, most of the time we give credit to white abolitionists. You know, and if you look at it closely, the Africans are already trying to abolish slavery. Even a lot of African free people who didn't want to repatriate to Africa, they were saying they would stay in America to fight to end slavery. They can't stand there and see their brothers and sisters in chains or leave. You know, but yeah, here we're looking at what was happening on the continent of Africa. So that's we try to go through a lot of examples, several examples in this particular discussion, Daddy B. And the idea is to show the extent to which all that started in Africa. That's what it took with them to the West. That no, you know, yeah, that we're not doing this. We're not playing this game, you know. And if you look at all those acts of rebellion, you know, even when people act like they don't know how to farm, or they spoil the tool, or they are sick, I know if you go farm, I don't go if you work on the plantation. All those were acts of resistance towards we're abolishing this thing. But we're trying to be interested in what was happening on the continent, you know, because of the question of we sold our people, right? And so we're trying to show the extent to which the will of the people, we try to illustrate it, you know. Jah Beloved has done quite a bit to illustrate it. Porfirio has done quite a bit to illustrate it over and over. I'm sure someone else has also done that while we're speaking. That the fact that the fighting is happening on the continent as soon as the thing jumped off. And we can't say that fight is over, you know, from the way man hear and feel our dreams. We hear from Mama Africa, from Colombia, the fight is not over at all. You know. Yeah, so that's what we're discussing, you know, like Africans are the ones who make sure the slavery at least was put in question. We're not out the gates yet. We're not home free yet. The fight is still on because it's taking on all sorts of different forms. The race that sees itself as superior still sees itself that way. So Snazzy said, what? We have to get busy and find a way to not just discredit, right? Yeah. Totally destroy, you know.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Also, you know, I think that the whole idea that, you know, the entire people sold out the entire people in the Western world is an idea that is very faulty at its very foundation, right?
Thank you.
And the whole idea is that, okay, so for instance, when the people who are in Africa right now, let's say their forefathers and foremothers, were they in one part of Africa?
Yeah.
Oh, come.
This was more of Josiah, 1600 stories. I get it. You want to belong. Memories, nostalgia, childhood assumption. Watching them, Sunday, headless one, no monarchy was your intellect.
One to Radio Culture. Apologies for that. We have lost the link to the lecture. We are doing everything in our power to reconnect.
With Fresh Connect.
We should be able to reconnect to the lecture in a quick minute or so. Please be patient and hang on with us.
How you remember this, your setbacks, liberation, how you tell yourself the comeback situation, at sunset rising up state, precision, transmitting energy.
Sound in the background, the Jonyame sounds of 7 Fireside. as we try to reconnect with the lecture. Please be patient, stay with us.
Buddha's unction, Buddha watching, Buddha's mahata, a wisdom pot, and I'll say this.
And just like that, we are back in the lecture. Enjoy.
Give thanks.
Radio culture.
All right. I feel if nobody has anything to say, I think I'm just going to make a quick comment. Oh, somebody was going to say something?
No, Raz, go ahead. You first.
Okay, give thanks. Enough thanks. All right. So there's a word that Daddy Bosco used that I want us all to make a key word in everything that we do, right? Narrative. The narrative. What is the narrative? The narrative is the way we think about something, essentially, right? The way a discussion is had and the impact it has, and therefore the way it steers our understanding of the subject is very important. Now, why is this important? Because the more we hear something, the more it becomes factual to us, subliminally. Believe it or not, there are things that we hear that we don't necessarily believe, but we hear it so many times that it forms part of our psyche. Growing up, how many of us didn't hear all these stories about the rivers and the bosom way they inside, and how many of us saw those bosom? We didn't see them, but didn't we notice that every time our daddies were driving and they were getting close to the riverside, they would honk, beep beep, just like they said they should, right? You think they really believed the bosom was there? Maybe they did, maybe not. But what I'm saying is, the narrative, however a discussion is had, becomes how people understand the subject. And so let's be forceful in our discussion of topics. Let's not sit down for things like this. You sold us into slavery to become the narrative. Let us establish the real narrative. And this is why I make the previous point. So, and yes, we are establishing the narrative by forcing an ignorant point of view, right? It's a well-researched point of view, looking at what Rasquesi presented today, looking at what Professor Wiro has buttressed with, looking at the examples that we ourselves have in our own individual experiences, right? And then applying some common sense to the whole thing. Just like Wiro said, it's not possible to say they are split us in two and then, the uptown people were selling the downtown people or anything like that. It's just.
But that's how they present it.
That's what I'm saying. The narrative. That's the narrative. That's the narrative that we must fight. So let's be very forceful in establishing our own narrative, even when we are speaking among ourselves as kindred, right? As brothers and sisters, home and abroad. Let's be forceful in trying to get to the bottom of the issue. Because Enyefe says somebody who was running away from the slave. Listen, I always say this. 2 miles away from the castle, there were people who were living there. So why would slavers leave people who live 2 miles away and go all the way to the north to go look for people? Let's face it, certain people were friendlier to the whole process. We're not denying that at all. What I'm saying is that it's not fair, though, that me, my grandfather, who was running away, or somebody else's grandfather, anybody's grandfather, who was running away, right, miles away from these slavers, who was helping to build the Salaga wall, he will be blamed for selling away people when somebody was living 2 miles away that wasn't even bothering the people at all. Let's have a serious discussion and let's direct the narrative properly so that we among ourselves will set the narrative for ourselves and not wait for the narrative to be set by somebody. Now, I'll end this by saying something. One experience that I had back in the day when I was on a bus from Kumasi to Accra. This guy, you know how people come on the bus and they preach and, and then they finish and take their small thing and go away and everything. So this guy comes and preaches and quotes John chapter this and Matthew chapter that and Ezekiel chapter that and the next chapter that. And then there's this guy in the back who is just sitting down, arms folded, or training at Padini Kasari, he raised his hand and he asked him, brother, what can we say John chapter say, Matthew chapter way, and Ezekiel. Now, one can so chapter way so anything. So right now, let's challenge ourselves with that. What is our own chapter way? That is the narrative. Let's be forceful in establishing the narrative. Give thanks.
Give thanks. And that's what Prof was saying about lion has to tell his own story, man. Lioness has to tell her own story, you know. Otherwise, the hunter will always be telling us what happened, you know. Yes, Bridget.
Yeah. Yes, I have a question to ask, you know. Yeah, we all know that slavery is abolished, but it's still going on. So what is the solution for it to stop? Because we all know the situation, people going to Saudi, Qatar, and they're going through a lot. See? So I wonder, as we conscious people, what is the solution for we to do for all this to be stopped? That's my question. Thanks, Rastafari.
The answer going to have to come from the collective, though, you know, but the question has an answer in itself, you know, built into the question. And already we've heard some things, right? If we're carrying the spirit of abolishing slavery, then you speak or act in a way where it's like we're not tolerating that, right? So right now you go fish that to whatever you want to do to push that, if it's part of it, exposing the world to understand that, and encouraging us to exposing the problem for the world to understand, and encouraging us to, like, to the point, like, this thing is wrapped up in the idea of how do we understand knowledge, right? Slavery is an expression of the world Europe created. I keep going there. I think that one sometimes if to make us say, oh yeah, you know, like that's an abstract idea. What we're calling the modern world, what we're calling knowledge, right? The history of ideas, all these kinds of things. If we're not careful, we're reading these things from the idea of white people. If we start thinking our own thoughts, maybe you could we have to give ourselves permission to say, this is what I think we should do, regardless of how the world operates. Otherwise, my man would have chopped off those white people's heads, make the chopping head off, right? People are not waiting to look at a white model. Maybe it's a model stuff you never think of before, you never see. Just do it. It will be connected to what our ancestors were doing. Our ancestors wanted to end the slavery any way we could. So anything we will do with that vibe in mind, in our heart, we did take to move. You know, so Brent, we're talking using media, you know, Brent just talking about narrative, speaking, thinking, moving in that direction. Mutago say sharp as an arrow, right? We stay on it and just keep pushing that idea. Because yeah, like you say, man, if I think of my brothers, right now, even in Ghana, sometimes we do things when people say street your home is beautiful and your cocoa fine, all those kinds of things. In a sense, they're telling you that black is a fault. It's tied into this idea still. You know? Yeah, the idea of blackness is synonymous with not being part of this story. And we don't want to be part of that story. We have to destroy that story. You know? So I think, where you're going is good. We have to think through, what do we do together, you know, and any kind of thoughts that hit you, let's follow through with it. Let's try it out. Maybe it's something we haven't thought of. Maybe it's something we've always been doing, but just bring it and let's do it. Any kind of idea, you know, if you like something and you get some new thought, you know, bring it, make we do it. You know, you and your brethren and your sister, you know, little collectives, huge collectives, whatever we do, as long as we're doing something, you know, so let's say what? Action, you know, thought through activity, right? We have to be doing things about these problems and not waiting on governments, you know, and, you know, forces that are may not be feeling the thing the way you feel out. The way you ask the question, I know you to feel the thing, you know, when maybe that's not the way someone else to feel out, you know. So once we're feeling it, you know, do what you think we should do.
And also, if I may quickly, I think some of these things have also already been put out there for us already. The works of the Right Honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey already has showed us the way, you know, because a lot of what we are talking about, let's face it, boils down to economic independence. You know what I'm saying? Because the reason why somebody will come and affect the way you govern yourself is because you are connected to them in a certain way where they can affect your economics, right? In a negative way. Now we have a system where, and to me personally, I think that a lot of talk can be had about all of this, but we can crystallize that into one simple idea. Let's reset. And again, for real, I know the season, right? So I'm using reset advisedly. But let's reset the world economic order. That to me will be close to a resolution of the issue, right? Because as long as we have a system where the price of our oil, the price of our gold, the price of our minerals, the systems that we should use to govern ourselves is dictated by some other entities. And we are threatened if we try to kick against that, right? As long as that system is in place, no? That's what His Majesty was referring to when he says, until the philosophy that holds one race superior and another inferior, until it's what? And Kwesi said it, until it's downstroyed, not sustained and babysitted and young people honey and fankoto honey and how we be said. No, mash it down. So that's how we have to think about it. I don't think that it's going to be an event. I think it's an ongoing process. And what we are doing is part of that, because we have to start from ourselves, how we think about making this happen, right? How do we make this happen in our own ways? How do we achieve economic independence among ourselves rather than continue fueling a system that only goes to kick against us? So Rasta, yeah, it's a deep question. I don't think that anybody has the simple, straightforward answer to it. I think that everybody has a piece of the puzzle. And again, I think the Right Honorable Marcus Garvey, and it's indeed His Majesty himself and Empress Menen and all the forebears that have come before us have pointed the way. And it all boils down to, first of all, and this is where we bring it down to the politics. So, because if we have a country where our water bodies are at risk, right? And the people who are put there to govern are not even batting an eyelid. You know what I'm saying? It's dangerous. It's dangerous because what Israel Benum Crown is going to be determined by somebody. Guys, we are sitting here talking about all these things. Do you know that Galamsey has drowned other big issues like the GMO issue? GMO, yes, in Ghana, they're already trying out GMO cowpeas in Ghana as we speak. We don't even know because there are way bigger issues, so to speak. But eventually, we are going to lose our dependence because our food, the seed is going to come from somewhere else. The water that we're going to drink, our water bodies are being messed with, right? Gold, now within 8 years, 10 years, 12 years, 20 years, whatever. And then how long does it take to reclaim the land? You see, and what are we doing about all of that? Okay, so however we think that we can plug in to be beneficial to the land that has nurtured us, I feel that that's the answer to that. But of course, that's not the whole answer. That's only a part of the answer. Give thanks.
Greetings. My Lord. I'd like to chip in on this. Beloved is touched on the economic bit. Nkrumah said it rightly. He says, seek ye first the political kingdom, and all things will be added unto it. What do I mean? You see, people go to Saudi Arabia to work and get 5,000 cedis. Can you imagine what the economy of Africa would have been like if we had an African common market, a borderless Africa? So that means all those people who go to Saudi Arabia do not need to go to Saudi Arabia. There are lucrative jobs all over Africa that Africans can migrate and do. It got to a time where the top hierarchy of the legal system in Gambia was Ghanaian. At a certain point in time, it was Sierra Leone, where Ghanaians were in the top hierarchy of their system. Libya. I remember clearly when people used to go to Libya. Imagine if they were legally migrating to Libya to work. Just like the last time I was talking to Seven, he had a New York address. Recently, I see he has the Los Angeles address. Seamless movement. That is one of the antidotes to this problem Africans constantly find themselves in: a brain drain, a skills drain, a drain of the youths going to other what they perceive to be economically better countries. So one of the things, and it's a bit medium to long term, that we need to look at to fix this problem fundamentally is a borderless Africa, where an African with a certain skill set can migrate to another part of Africa. Even if not full-time migration, go there, work, and come back to their home base. So that's one of the things that we need to look at until we come to agree that the solution to Africa's problem in African unity, where the resources of the entire African continent can serve the entire African continent, then we'll be in this quagmire. So for me, I think one of the things we need to critically think about is over the next 8 to 12 years, and this might not be a consensus, but I'm strongly suggesting that to change the dynamics, conscious-minded people have to sit around the table where legislation is made, where political power is disseminated. What is happening is, so Jah Beloved was talking about a situation where our water bodies are being destroyed, and the people we vote for to ensure that these water bodies are preserved for future generations don't seem to care. So as long as I and I who feel here we're concerned about Africa, we're conscious and things, as long as we continue to play on the periphery, we will always sing lamentations until we take that bold step that Osajifo took. Osajifo says after reading Marcus Garvey, he was fired with a zeal to achieve the ideals Marcus had enumerated. So he moved to Manchester. After the Pan-African Conference, through various circumstances, he came to Ghana. And then we all know the rest of the story. So we don't have to let that baton lie on the ground. We need to pick it up and run with it. And I sincerely believe that if we look at things this way, we'll be able to, as it were, change a situation where young able-bodied Ghanaians go to Saudi Arabia, go to Qatar. They even go to Yemen, where there's war. You understand? So this is my 2 cents. Give thanks.
Radio culture.
Give thanks, Daddy B.
Give thanks, my Lord. Yes, we recognize the presence of Ras Malcolm, Western Regional Chair of RCG. He hasn't said anything. I trust he's listening. My Lord, if there is any questions, contribution you would like to add, please, the floor is open. The boss, we've also not heard from you yet, so if you want to make any input. Please, I have something small just to say. Yes, about Africans and their role in the abolitionists. I think I gathered from somewhere that oftentimes during the narrative, we don't recognize the Africans who lost their lives fighting the slave raid or the capturing. And so when our brothers outside the continent argue that Africans sold each other into slavery, they forget to acknowledge those many Africans who lost their lives. And from what we heard, it may even look like more people lost their lives fighting slavery, preventing themselves from being captured, than the number of people who are actually captured and sent to the West or enslaved. One time we visited Cape Coast, and one of the brothers pointed us to the fact that we should observe the fact that every dungeon, they have cannons pointed to the people. So he asked us why we think that some of they have cannons pointed to the people. And he reminded us that the essence was to show us that even those who were in the dungeons, the slave so-called castles, they were threatened by the people. And they consistently, sometimes the people break into the dungeons to free the slaves. And so one of their targets was to make sure that they keep the people in check, hence the cannons or firing machines over the dungeons. So yes, this is just to buttress the point that yes, Africans ourselves, we participated because innate in us, we are not the people who endorse or who celebrate slavery or the enslavement of our own kind. So this is a little I wanted to add. So please, if anybody has any other inputs, comments, addition, our time is up.
It'll be good to hear Russ Malcolm.
Ras, you did it. Ras Malcolm. Please, let's hear your voice.
I'm good, though. I'm good. Man is so terrible. So, man good, you know?
Any thoughts, any kind of insights, questions? Your thoughts would be valued, man. Tell us something, brother.
Radio culture.
Oh, yes, Brother Seven. Everything is set speed, you know? Because I think Daddy Bosco hit the nail right on the head. We must be part of decision making. That is the bottom line. That is it. Because once we are on the periphery, we are on the sideline, decisions will be taken to our disadvantage. So that is what I guess maybe our generation, we could not actually make it manifest. So maybe we have to empower the youth and actually put them in a set of mindset where they should be part of decision making, the front line of political decision making. That is where the decisions are made. Otherwise, at the end of the day, decisions will be made to the disadvantage of I. And Daddy Bosco has said it all. He said we will always be singing lamentation. So I will concur to the position of Daddy Bosco.
Give thanks. Thanks.
So please, I want to ask if anybody has any other input to make, or we'll go back to the presenter to give us his closing remarks, and then we call it a day.
Should I go ahead? Yeah, so what you said, Kofi Asante was speaking to what John Beloved said earlier on about people who were close to the castles who were spared, but not always, because you said that the point of the cannons are those people too. And from the first epigraph that I read, I tried to talk about the extent to which you could be living close to the castle. We talk about people attacking the Cape Coast Castle, you know, all those castles. People were attacking from the vicinity. So yeah, even those people that were thought to be in the white protectorate were fighting against slavery. They would attack the castles. They were not coming from Kumasi to come and attack the Cape Coast Castle. It was people in that Cape Coast area who were attacking the castle. So both coexisted at the same time. I wanted to answer the point about economics. You know, the solution is economics. It's a very beautiful idea, But I think we'll make a huge mistake if we think it's just economics. That's the point I'm trying to make. Let's abolish the knowledge system, which includes economics, just one pocket, man. Let's face it. There's a lot of research that's countering this idea of it's all about economic solutions. People have tried it. African revolutionists have tried that. Other people have tried that. It's not just economics, man. There's a desire economy, right? How come a lot of white people never owned slaves, but it was supporting slavery? Slavery was taking the jobs away from them, but it was supporting slavery. So it's not just economics. It's political. And I think what I'll beg of us to do in these reasonings is also to rethink meanings of concepts. We don't go to a concept through the word, right? You don't just hear economics and go find out what it means in the dictionary or what philosophers have said and said this is what economics is. No. Let's go to what economics is, and then we think about the word. Because right now, the words they've given us are the filters through which we go to our understandings of things. What I'm trying to say is this: our idea of economics may not be what we will be saying at all if we never heard them talk about their definitions of economics. Our idea of politics may not be what we're trying to deal with at all if we never heard of their ideas. So we're talking about, get involved in politics. Let's rethink politics. What would Kwame Nkrumah think about politics today if he had the benefit of hindsight that we have? You think he would think the same way? I doubt it. Because Nkrumah was a dynamic thinker. He was evolving, right? He would change some of his positions, not abandon positions, but maybe alter his approach. We update our knowledge. But one thing we seem not to be questioning is epistemology. We're not questioning knowledge itself. And we have to. Otherwise, we'll just run around in circles and then we say, we have to, you can join the government. The government can be full of rascals, and I guarantee you Africa will be no better shape. It can be full of conscious people. It will be no better unless we destroy the order of thinking that we have in the world today. That's a guarantee. So let's talk about economic solutions, but he tells you about points where material economic solutions will not fix it for us. It's on another level that we have to do a total scrapping and reconfiguration of ideas, right? It's good to say, United States of America, they've done it in America, why can't we do it? You know how much stealing and murder they did before they built the United States of America? You want to do the same thing? Mm-hmm. I'm not going to join you if that's what you want to do. But we could build a united Africa, but maybe it won't be like their thing. You know what I mean? Let's be real about these things. We have to think about things on our terms. Maybe they've beaten our ideas out of us violently through our education. So we don't have anything. So every time we hear them say liberal, so we're liberal. I'm radical, militant, I'm militant, I'm conservative, we hear everything they say, we repeat it. No. What if we never heard their language? Let's get to that place. Scrap our minds up of all the ideas and say, look, what is economics? What does it really mean? Let's work hard and define it for ourselves. Something that benefits us and go for it. Otherwise, we'll be chasing this money nonsense that never will benefit us. So I'm saying, I concur with what everyone is saying. What I'm saying is that maybe let's have two tracks going. Those who want to believe fully, like, let's work with what we have, cool. But there's a part that is so underdeveloped in our thinking. This part of what else is possible, right? Let's put more energy into that. Let's redefine politics. Let's abandon the idea of politics that was given to us. Reject the idea of economics that was given to us. Reject the idea of knowledge that's been given to us and come up with something that really means something. Unless we think we're inferior beings that don't have any original ideas, so we have to copy theirs and build on theirs. And then we'll be in the same gutter, right? We have to be more daring. We're creative people. Let's jump in the idea. Let's think of new ideas. Let's dream of things. And let's move forward with those ideas and be confident that our ancestors are the ones that are working with us in these directions. Because what we're doing is when we say let's join politics, basically you're working with a nation state that was created by Europeans. The Ghana thing we're having, we didn't create that. It was a European fabrication. We're struggling to make sense of it. It's on your terms. Our economy. It was that we have our own African continental economy, and we have to think about what we're doing. Otherwise, we just go replicate what's happening in Europe. It's not to say we should be careful not to repeat the politics of 19th century nationalism, European nationalism. And unfortunately, that seems to be our ideas that are the direction which we've been opened up to through our education. We have to rebel against that. We have to turn our backs on that. So to wrap up, I just want to start. Just list the number of forts that were attacked, I've mentioned some, but Commander was attacked. Like people living in Commander, the Commander Fort. Second D, there was a fort there. I mentioned that earlier on. The people living in that vicinity attacked it with the idea of ending slavery, trying to free captives. Kitco's Castle, our people in that vicinity attacked it several times. I was reading Kitco's governor's records, and he was talking about how often Africans tried to attack them to free slaves. Enslaved Africans, so to speak, captives. Elmina Castle was attacked too. Anumabo, it happened. Hafasine, Christianborg. So these are the ones that have been documented. The point is, we were attacking, and we have to also remember that the failed attempts, like the brother was saying, more people died trying to fight. All this talking we're doing today is in honor of them. I go with Fanon when he says the failed attempt must be as valuable to us as the successful attempts too. So all the people who let their lives go so that we could move around a little freer, let the world know that we're not taking these things. We honor them, we salute them. That's the basis of what we're doing right now. And we have to win this one for them, more or less, because all the skulls and skeletons under the Atlantic Ocean right now, tons of them. People who jumped off the boats, people who died on both sides of the Atlantic. And we're talking about the people taken to the east to in India. All those are the people we're fighting for. We have to fight for some finality here, not by going to replicate what Europe has done and just paint it black. So that's where I'd like to end it.
Give thanks, my Lord, for the education. Yes. I've been inspired, motivated, and educated, and I trust everyone here as well. We give thanks. We encourage ones and ones to check out YouTube.
All right. Yes, this has been the bi-weekly lecture of the Rastafari Council of Ghana, dealing with the topic today. Not Rastafari, Africans were the first abolitionists. Africans were the first abolitionists, and the speaker has been Ras Kwesi Anoche. Until next 2 weeks from today, that is, when we come your way again with another edition of the lecture. Thank you very much for doing the listening on Radio Culture, and we'll see you soon. Please take here for some serious music, and I'll be back actually to present Radio Reverbs. Till such times, one love.
Learning how the human patience to explain ourselves.
This has been S2 weeks.
We give thanks for your organizational skill. Always staying on top of it. So blessed I am.
I give thanks, my Lord, Rastafari. So next 2 weeks we'll come again with another edition. We'll announce the topic as we go on. So I appreciate everyone. My Lord, give thanks for your presence. Give thanks, Rastafari.
One more time. Let's love.
Oh, this ultra codified. Cause the snakes are because of this. Cause social climate looks like I have that. They felt used in a proxy war. One